All right, everyone. So this is a little bit of a spring break special. The show's been on hiatus for a bit. Been on my last semester at university, so it's been a little bit intense. Trying not to pull my focus away from anything, but so we're gonna jump right into it, baby. So I've been feeling like, and I've been saying this for months. The economy. I've been saying this for years, honestly, that the economy has kind of been teetering on the edge of a big recession for quite a long time. And I think there's a number of different reasons for this, right? I mean, once COVID hit in 2020, companies weren't really stopped from profiteering, right? They engaged in shrinkflation and greedflation, in shitification, to an extent that we've never really seen before. They took advantage of the pandemic. Now, it was sort of Congress's and our responsibility to do something about that, to exercise windfall taxes, to do something to stop the profiteering, because this has knock-on effects in the future, right? And I think we're about to see them. Companies and stock market and all of that stuff are predicated on infinite reoccurring growth, right? They expect profits to not only be there, but they expect them to increase percentage-wise year over year. And that's obviously not sustainable in the long run. So that's why you saw so much, greedflation, shrinkflation, and inshitification, for whatever buzzword you want to use, during the pandemic. That's why they really didn't stop. That's why it feels like everything has kind of been continuing to go on past 2020, 2021, into 2022, 2023, 2024, and now 2025 and 2026. That's why you keep seeing it, is because these companies are literally not made to stop doing that. Once the cat's out of the bag, once they realize that that is a way that they can increase their profits, they're going to keep doing that. Well, that can only go on so long, right? All right, so I wrote a little bit down, so I'm just going to kind of read this, read a little bit of this. The economy has been teetering on the edge for a long time. When companies took advantage of the pandemic to profiteer through shrinkflation, greedflation, and shitification, that can't easily be stopped, right? Shareholders not only expect profits, but they expect infinite, unending profits, right? They not only want profits, they not only want money, they want all of the money, all of the conceivable monies, real and not real, right? That's just how the stock market and companies work, right? They're not going to suddenly stop doing the shrinkflation or the inshitification or the greedflation or whatever buzzword you want to use that's more prudent for the specific company in question. They're not just going to stop, right? If they see that it's working, they're going to continue to do that, right? Well, if you pair that with our lack of enforcement of antitrust and anti-monopoly laws, and just the seemingly never-ending corporate consolidation and just market dominance over these handful of mega corporations have, it creates a really bad economic environment, right? It creates a sort of house of cards type of thing where, like, that can only go on for so long, right? Increases in rental prices have been outpacing wage growth for many, many years. Increases in the cost of food have been outpacing wage growth for many, many years. And that can only go on for so long, right? 90% of stocks are owned by the top 10%, right? So if you are a stockholder, if you own your own home, you aren't feeling the squeeze nearly as much as most people, but most people rent. Most people have to work, they aren't rich. And so that bottom 80% has been feeling the squeeze more and more just over time, just slowly, and that can only go on for so long, right? That's the whole K-shaped economy thing. The only thing that's been keeping the economy from entering a recession during that squeeze is just the overwhelming amount of spending from that top 20%, right? There's the whole K-shaped economy, right? They're essentially propping up the rest of the economy with their spending. Now, you could talk about wealth inequality, wage inequality, or whatever, but that's a whole different topic and worth talking about, but not directly related to this. All of this puts the economy in a pretty precarious situation, right? It doesn't paint a very good picture. And markets want stability, right? And Donald Trump is basically the definition of instability, okay? He is not good for markets. If you look at, if you've ever taken a more advanced economics class, you talk about something called the Solow growth model. The Solow growth model, it's basically a way of projecting growth into the future and using those numbers to compare against other economies, small or big or whatever, in coming years, based on a set of fixed variables, right? And those fixed variables are capital and labor, and those are not so much changing, right? But basically what the Solow growth model really demonstrates is that the big A, the total factor of productivity, is by far the biggest indicator of how well an economy is going to grow in the future, right? Well, I would argue that Donald Trump being elected and everything that he's done, everything that he's doing to the economy, to our institutions, to everything else, inherently lowers that big A score, right? Which will have real economic effects in the future, right? All right, you can't just go around and piss off all of your trade partners, all of your allies, and expect there to be no outcome from it, right? You also throw on the fact that this is sort of draconian ICE enforcement is killing tourism in the US. People don't want to come and visit nearly as much as they used to, so that also hurts the GDP growth. All of this is bad for our institutions, right? That big A, which is a big institutions and the stability of government and the reliability of markets, all of that feeds into that big A part of the solo growth model, right? Well, all of this hurts market stability in general. All of this is decreasing that big A. It's not good for markets. Markets want consistency. They want stability. They want not an unpredictable X factor like the Trump administration has been. Hell, he literally tried to coup the government, right? And we didn't do anything about it, okay? And you know what? Furthermore, we rewarded him. We reelected him. And when I say we, I mean as a nation. And so like that does not look good. None of this paints a good picture for the economy, right? It paints a picture of a house of cards type of economy, right? Now, inherent to capitalism is the boom bust cycle, right? You're going to see periods of growth and you're going to see periods of recession, right? This is inherent part of capitalism. Arguably, the downside of capitalism is that you're going to see a much more of a fluctuation type thing, and that long-term planning and the ability to fend off these fluctuations in the economy are limited depending on how much, how interested the public is in government involvement in the economy, right? All of this nonsense with Iran and its effects on the oil market are the exact type of thing that is the blow, the gust of wind that all this economy needs. If this economy is a house of cards, right, all it needs is a gust of wind to knock it all over. And that just feels more and more like, the way the economy has been for quite a while is that's why I say it feels like it's been teetering on the edge for a while. And honestly, I've been a little bit surprised that we haven't entered a recession already, right? Throw that whole AI stock market bubble on top of it. And honestly, straight up delusional stock, the overinflated and basically delusional stock market investing practices over the last however many years, right? Look at the valuation of Tesla and a number of these other companies that, if you look at their traditional metrics, their stock valuation should be nowhere near where it is based on the amount of revenue that they bring in. But, there's just so much money flowing around amongst those top 20%. Where are they going to put it? You can only spend so much money on yachts and fancy dinners, right? And in homes in the Bahamas. You can only spend so much money on that. So eventually that money's got to go somewhere, and it goes into the stock market, and you see sort of pretty kind of delusional investing practices over the last few years. All of this just paints a picture of a house of cards, of an economic house of cards that's just begging to be pushed over. And all it's going to take is one thing, and one thing might be very big, and that is the whole Iran war, its effects on the oil markets. And all of this is being overseen by a completely incompetent, completely unqualified, and honestly straight up delusional administration that, other administrations, let's just pretend for a second that this recession that I'm sort of soft predicting that we're going to be entering is a natural market fluctuation, is one of those natural troughs, the peaks and the troughs as you're taught in principles of economics, right? It's just one of those natural troughs that's going to happen, right? Well, if that is the case, which I don't think it is for all the reasons I've laid out, I think this is sort of a special one. But even if it was the case, this administration is not equipped to handle it properly. They are completely delusional. And furthermore, they don't care. They do not care one bit about the affordability crisis, about the cost of living crisis, about standards of living for anybody but their billionaire homeboys and donors. They just, quite frankly, they don't. And so it's just... But all of this paints the picture of a house of cards, of an economy that's on the verge of collapse. And I'm going to make a soft prediction that if we enter a recession like this and the administration continues to be delusional like they are, and Donald Trump stays alive and nobody takes his position, because, right, let's pretend that Donald Trump passed, he suddenly died from some disease that he's been hiding from the public or whatever, right? Right in the middle of a recession kicking off. It is maybe slightly conceivable that like JD Vance or whoever would take the reins after that might be able to kind of quell it back a little bit. But I have no hope that with Donald Trump at the helm of it all, that they're going to be able to, keep this from becoming a runaway spiral type thing, right? This could be the big one. This could be the big recession. I mean, a recession of the scale that we've never seen in our lifetimes. It would not blow my mind if that was the case, right? I've been predicting for months that we're sort of teetering on the edge, and that it wouldn't blow my mind if 6 months from now we enter some sort of a recession. It could be a big recession, right? And we just got a really terrible economic indicator. If you look at real GDP growth rates over the last couple of years, they've been going down since 2022, I believe, right? Not a ton. They've only been going down small fractions of a percent, but they have been trending downwards, right? And if you look at Q1 of 2025, it was the first time that it had gone negative since, I believe, Q3 of 2022. Right. And that was sort of the tail end of all of the major direct impacts of the pandemic. It still took many years, and we're still not quite repaired from the supply chain damage that, the pandemic had globally. But a lot of the more acute damage was sort of repaired by Q3 2022. And that's why you saw real GDP numbers and whatnot tend to improve around that time period. Well, there has to be a good reason why Q1 2025 was the first time in 4 years, 3 years since we saw a negative real GDP growth, right? Well, we just got, I saw projections that it was going to be like 1.9% total for the year of 2025. But it might be less than that now because they just revised down and gave out their official Q4 2025 real GDP numbers, and it's only 0.7%. Look, that is an incredible drop to go all the way from 4.4 to 0.7. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, if you're not a bit more versed in economics, thinking like, oh, 1%, 2%, 3%, none of these these sound like really small numbers, like 3% of $100 is only $3, right? You still only got $97. That's not the case though, right? When you're talking about an economy on the scale of the United States, you're talking about 30 some $trillion. 1% is ginormous. That is absolutely massive. And so to see such a multi-percentage drop is very shocking. And furthermore, this is not Q1 2026. This is Q4 2025. Okay. The Q1 2026 numbers, I'm sure, are not looking good. And then you throw on this whole Iran nonsense, which I saw projections that it was going to negatively affect the real GDP rate by somewhere around 1%. Honestly, that sounds like it could be low. We're still in the beginnings of this conflict, so who knows how it's going to turn out. But if it continues to trend in a poor way, if China and Russia continue to hop in on the side of Iran or something like that, it could be way more than 1%, right? And all of that is going to be continued on top of an already decreasing real GDP rate, and us pissing off all our trade partners. And, we're in an especially precarious place because, we've been the hegemonic, the top dog in the global economy for a long, long time. But, China's been catching up, all these different nations, they're developing. You see more developed nations sort of becoming developing nations becoming developed nations, second world nations becoming first world, third world becoming second world. And so all of this chips away slowly, bit by bit, at the U.S.'s position at the top of the pyramid. And so, 0.7 is that's very scary. It's important when you look at all these numbers to look at real GDP and not nominal GDP numbers, right? Typically, when you see just the word GDP and it doesn't specify that it's the real GDP numbers, typically that is the nominal GDP rate, which, and the way that you calculate the nominal GDP rate is you take all of the goods and services that are sold in the US And you take their price times the quantity of those goods sold, and that's what you get the nominal GDP. Well, nominal GDP from year to year does not account for inflation, right? It does not account for increases in prices, increases in profit margins of these companies, shrinkflation, greedflation, enshittification. It does not account for any of these things. That's what the real GDP rate accounts for. The real GDP rate takes the prices from last year times the quantities of this year. That's why you can look at the nominal GDP rate. You might look at some different, less trustworthy, less serious publications or news sites or whatever, and they're going to report that the GDP rate is higher than this. The nominal GDP rate might be higher than this, but that doesn't mean anything, right? When you're looking at an economy, you want to look at, it doesn't matter what the cost of anything is, right? It doesn't matter how much money something costs. You want to see increases in production. It's not how much the thing costs, it's how many of the things your economy is able to produce and distribute to its public or whatever, right? So yeah, this is just a quick video talking about economics. This does not look good. You know what? I'm gonna make a soft prediction that they're gonna come out and they're gonna come up with all kinds of excuses. They're gonna come out and they're gonna pull out all the stops. Okay, they're gonna pretend like the numbers are wrong, or that the BEA is biased and can't be trusted, or that they're lying, or that these are the real numbers. They're going to come out with their own numbers. They're going to try all sorts of stuff. And honestly, if it keeps trending like this and we really do enter a recession, like I'm kind of softly predicting by like Q2, Q3 of 2026, they might just stop releasing numbers at all. The Trump administration might find some way to just get this agency to completely not release any numbers. And they're going to come up with all kinds of convoluted reasons, that don't make any sense. But that seems like it would fit their playbook all too well to just say, you know what, these numbers look terrible. We're just not going to release them and say it's the Democrats' fault, or it's Biden's fault, or it's whatever, anybody but their fault, when in reality, it's obviously all their fault. But yeah, this was just a little quick video talking about this. Yeah, hopefully I get the show up and going a bit more seriously now that I'm sort of halfway through this semester. This is my last semester at university, so been trying to focus. It's been by far the most intense semester. Doing this show is a big time sink, so I didn't want anything to distract me from studying, from ensuring that I pass, because it would be very sad to fail one of these super hard classes at the very end. And then have to take another semester or something. That would be really obnoxious. So, okay, that's about it. Peace out, y'all. Hopefully I won't be gone for too long.